Welcome back to the YouTube channel of Cascadia Living Wisdom. It takes everything within me to not say it's good to see you, but of course you're seeing me and I'm not seeing you. But I am pleased to see your appreciation for the videos I've been doing. And so I want to do something today a little bit different. I want to share some thoughts on good and evil, but the way I'll do that is I'd like to read a passage from my recent book, This and That. I'll be drawing from a chapter called Good and Evil and just take several short selections from that. And if you have already received the book, and it is available through our website, you'll know that I'm drawing from chapter 4. So think of us as sitting in a library, and I'm now going to read you a few of the passages from that chapter that speak to this question of good and evil. What I'll do is start with goodness, because then perhaps we can find a perspective on badness that's helpful. In the Judeo-Christian tradition, the divine depths are understood to be the source not only of all goodness, but of all things. From such a perspective, as an outpouring of goodness that took the form of spirit flowing into matter. This is the reason Judaism and Christianity have both understood creation in terms of goodness and its inherent generativity. To say that creation is good is to say that rivers, clouds, plants, animals, and humans all reflect the overflowing goodness of the Creator. Regardless of whether or not it is realized, creativity and goodness are basic properties of being. In humans, goodness describes a quality of being that's both deeper and broader than morality. It's not limited to either the absence of badness or the presence of virtue. Rather, it's characterized by radical self-outpouring that is expressed in the passing on to others of the good that comes into our lives. It's a squandering rather than a saving. This is how we and all of nature reveal our essential goodness, by mirroring the source of all life. Too often we see ourselves as more of a container than a conduit. Operating out of a sense of deficit, we might long for love and goodness, but be slow to pass them on to others. But goodness that does not manifest itself as an outflow of abundance is not true goodness. Goodness is love and wisdom in action. And as such, goodness can be recognized to be the capstone of psychological and spiritual development in humans. The desire for the good is a longing for truth and beauty, the truth and beauty of our being. Let's turn to evil and see if we can understand it better with these preliminary thoughts on goodness. Evil is often described as the absence of good, but while this may be true as a generalization, it does not go far enough into the character of evil to help us truly know it as we encounter it in the world and in ourselves. In his book, The Gulag Archipelago, Alexander Solzhenitsyn suggests that the line dividing good and evil cuts through the heart of every human being. I think this is a good place to start. The line dividing good and evil is not a boundary between those who are good and those who are evil, but it's one that cuts through the heart of every one of us, because we all have an astounding capacity for both good and evil. This is what we might call an inconvenient truth. It's much easier to think of good people and bad people, and usually placing ourselves in the first category, we then distance ourselves and stand back in judgment of those we deem bad or evil. But it's not as simple as that. Erich Fromm spent his professional life as a psychiatrist attempting to understand evil. He concluded that the greatest evil lies in strivings that are directed against life. Evil, in his view, emerges from an anti-life posture. It is that which kills the spirit. It is that which deeply wounds the soul, sometimes destroys the body, and can even, of course, end the life of someone. In the early stages of development, evil often takes a benign form. It may, for example, appear as something as commonplace as controlling others or fostering their risk aversion and dependency instead of nurturing vitality, independence, creativity, and risk-taking. But this is a way of killing or constraining the human spirit because it results in people becoming cautious followers who go through life without ever truly living. According to Erich Fromm, anything that discourages growth, awareness, awakening, autonomy, self-responsibility, imagination, creativity, or freedom, anything that does any of these things is destructive of our essential humanity and should therefore be seen as evil. I agree. These are harsh words, but I find them very helpful. These are things that most of us have at least some tendency to do, either in relationship to ourselves or to others. Of course, evil can take much less benign forms. Rather than growing out of caution and fear, it can be an expression of hatred and anger. This might be built around a lust for power that includes abusing or manipulating others for one's own advantage. An even more overt anti-life posture is a desire to kill those who are an impediment to one's greed or unquenchable quest for power. But evil can also exist at a systemic level, not just the personal level. Think of forces of evil within society that destroy personal freedom and initiative and turn people into followers or automatons. This too is anti-life and is therefore an expression of evil. But although these systemic expressions of evil appear impersonal, they start with and are nurtured by people who would likely never consider themselves as evil, but who are consciously or unconsciously moving against the flow of life. At any point in time, we are all somewhere on the continuum of good and evil. The choices we make and our awareness and our honesty about these choices will determine which direction we're moving in. Those who become evil are not born evil. They simply fail to recognize that moment by moment, they stand at a fork in the road of life and have to decide whether in this moment they will choose good or bad, truth or untruth, life or anti-life. They also fail to recognize that with each step, it becomes increasingly more difficult to choose anything other than the path they are on. Moment by moment, we all face this same choice. There's no question that we'll be influenced by how others make this choice, particularly whether our lives have been filled with goodness and evil. But for all of us, this is our choice, not those of others. It's our choice that determines our character and our destiny. Knowing and naming both good and evil is essential in the journey towards wholeness. The path towards alignment with our goodness requires that we confront the depths of our own darkness. As Hildegard van Bingen says, we need two wings on which to fly. One is the knowledge of good, and the other is the knowledge of evil. Without both wings, we will never fly. End of quote. This suggestion of Hildegard of van Bingen offers us important help in identifying the hidden wisdom in the polarity of good and evil. She speaks of the importance of knowledge of good and evil, but the crucial thing is that this knowing must be personal, not theoretical. Until we're deeply familiar with our own capacity for evil, we'll never be fully free to know and live out of the fullness of our own goodness. As I attempt to lean into the both and space between good and evil, I become keenly aware how hard it is to do this. Instinctively, I tend to think of good as obviously good and evil as obviously bad. But I recognize that I will never truly be able to understand evil in myself or in others until I can engage it apart from judgment. Judgment moves me against that which I judge. It always does. Hospitality moves me towards it. If, as I tend to believe, wisdom emerges from an altered perception, what sort of perceptual correction might help us in recognizing the hidden goodness of others, even though those who we instinctively judge as bad? Jesus described it as taking the log out of our eye rather than focusing on the speck of dust in someone else's eye. Wisdom starts with a deep knowing of ourselves and the radical release of our judgment and our judgmentalism, a release that's possible when we truly know our own capacity for good and for evil. It's impossible to truly see the world and other people until we can do this with ourselves. Deep personal knowing of our capacity for good and evil is the foundation of wisdom. It is living in relationship to the good and evil that is in us, but also in others and in the world. Well, that's a few of the things that are included in that chapter. It perhaps also illustrates what I'm doing in the book, this and that. And I hope that you'll get it and not just read it so that you become wise. There's no wisdom that comes from information. But practice yourself entering the space between good and evil and the other polarities, the great polarities of human existence. Enter it and notice what you can see more clearly as you do. Bye for now. Be well, and we'll see you again soon.